Folks, welcome back to the Anchor Podcast. Here today with the president of Christ College, Dr. Todd Bates. Todd serves as the founding president and professor of Humanities at Christ College, and prior to his role at Christ College, Todd served almost 3 decades in Christian higher education in both administrative and teaching roles. His research interests include Augustine patristic engagement with Greco-Roman philosophy, the intersection between Christianity and culture, the integration of theology and psychology, and apologetics from the early church to contemporary culture. Todd is the author of The Authority and Sufficiency of Scripture in the Humanities and The Authority and Sufficiency of Scripture, edited by David Dockery. He is also the author of the forthcoming book from Routledge, Leadership in Rhetoric. Todd, welcome to the Anchor Podcast. Thanks for being with us today.
Sure. Thanks. It's great to be here.
So
Yes, that's one of our professors walking back now.
It's an active popping place. Fantastic. We always love to start off just getting a sense of your own formation, education. Did you grow up in a Christian home? Did you grow up in Christian schools? What was education and faith like for you growing up?
Yeah, it's a great question. So I was a typical Southerner, so raised where Christianity was a cultural aspect, not a real life spiritual aspect. And so it was about a mile wide and an inch deep. So because the family was committed, we were in church almost every Sunday, but it didn't stick, I would say. And so when high school came along, I got into athletics and really allowed that to become my identity. And so I was absolutely convinced I was going to play wide receiver for the Dallas Cowboys.
Nice.
And it didn't work out. So, but I went and played college football. And toward the end of that, God used just the abuse on the body to begin to slowly but surely withdraw that from me. And so as football was taken from me, I realized I didn't really have an identity. I didn't know who I was outside of football. So it was a period of about 2 or 3 weeks. If you know anything about Spurgeon, Charles Spurgeon and his conversion, it was very much 2 weeks, very Spurgeon-esque. And so I was the most miserable of human beings. It is as though God had pulled back the rock on my heart, allowed me to see all the scurrying things underneath. And I was disgusted with the man I was. I couldn't believe that I was seeing myself for the first time. And so in utter misery, God allowed me to see the cross and what he had done for me in Christ. And I could not get to the cross quickly enough. And from that moment on, my single goal in life is to know God as fully as possible. And so I immediately started reading systematic theologies. I had no idea that you weren't supposed to read them necessarily from cover to cover. So I dove in and started. And not much has changed since then. So that is still the one goal in my life.
It's a beautiful story. And when did you begin to conceive of the idea of starting a whole new college? I love to hear about the origins of Christ College.
Well, it is something that God did. He ignited my mind just in the desire to know him, and then began to realize there's nothing in this world that doesn't reflect back on him. And so I had a voracious appetite. I wanted to learn anything and everything I could get my hands on. And I went to a state university, so the pickings were pretty slim, but it was fairly formative in helping me understand the immensity of what is available out there to know and how paltry my understanding of the world was. And so I just began a lot of self-study. Then I went to Beeson Divinity School, which further ignited my mind and kind of directed these passions, and then went to do my PhD. And shortly after, toward the end of my PhD time, I started teaching at a Bible college in Dallas, Texas, Criswell College. And the president there was a former professor of mine at Beeson. And he wanted to start a liberal arts program at Criswell. And so he knew my background and knew my interests. So he asked me to come start a great books program there. And it was in preparing for that and building that I just fell in love with the whole approach to education driven by a classical liberal arts approach to the great books. And sitting in my office, I remember, as a matter of fact, the first day at Christ College, I read this to our faculty, and it was a section from Plato's Theaetetus, where Socrates is describing himself as a midwife. And he said, I have no wisdom of my own, but I am able to take those that God brings me and to, through a series of questions, give birth to the truth that God has put in. He said, so often because I do so with questions, people think I have wisdom of my own, but he says, I'm not the wise one. It is God that brings these students to me. And it was something about reading that section, having gone through the great books, that something close to a longing developed in my heart to do education in this way. It was deeply transformative. It was deeply relational. And that's what I wanted. And so as I began to look around, I began to see, well, there's not a whole lot that focuses on that. And then almost out of the blue, there was this sense of, well, why don't you start a college? And it was one of those things that, well, that's not a common thought that would occur to my head. And so I took that as a sense of God's leadership. And so back in 2003, we began conversations in Orlando. It's my hometown. So we were going to place St. Augustine's College, is what we were going to call it, in Orlando. And through just a series of economic problems that were occurring in the nation, I'm a junior prof with small kids. They got cold feet and backed off. And so have been on the academic pilgrimage for almost 3 decades. And then it came to the point where God said, all right, it's now time to put up or shut up. And so we packed it up, my wife and I, and came back. We had elderly parents in Orlando. And so instead of Orlando, my wife prevailed upon me to put it at the beach, which both of us love. And so
Where in Florida is Christ College?
we are in Satellite Beach, Florida. So it's near Melbourne, it's in Brevard County. So it's due east of Orlando. And the college is less than a mile from the beach. So literally I could walk to the beach from the class. We have students do that, but we prefer them to be in class first and then to walk over to the beach.
And then tell us about 4 years as you're envisioning. You've got your first students already there on campus. As you've kind of dreamed of and mapped out 4 years of receiving the fullness of this kind of transformative education, what do the students have in store? What's coming?
All right. Yeah, great question. So we are a Great Books College. So we offer one degree. It's a BA in Humanities and Entrepreneurship. And I know the first question I usually get is, how in the world do those things go together? And it's really quite a remarkable connection. So the humanities is driven by the great books. So we are learning to see what is genuinely human throughout the human epics, through works of great literature. And so as we begin to see what is genuinely human and what is the good they seek, we are also running parallel with that with entrepreneur classes. And most of the entrepreneurs I talk with, when I ask them what distinguishes a genuine entrepreneur from another, they will usually answer something like the ability to see. Now, that is a
The
beautiful
ability to
depiction.
see, is that right?
Yes. So to see in human nature, to see in the economy, to see in the local business community a need that is not yet met or a problem that is not yet satisfied. And so it's the ability to see that and not only see the problem, but to see the solution in the problem. And so as our students are working through the humanities, they're learning to see what is genuinely human, what is genuinely good, and what people seek. And then in the entrepreneurial classes, they're beginning to understand what they ought to be seeing in culture. And so when those two things come together, they just really, it ignites them with this entrepreneurial mindset. And so the other question that usually comes after this is, must my kid be an entrepreneur? And so some people are not cut out to be an entrepreneur, but the entrepreneurial mindset can be understood as kind of a proactive engagement with life. So we all need to be engaged in life in some form or aspect. And we believe that God created us to work and that work is a good thing. And so whether one can handle the risk of an entrepreneur and goes out and starts their own business, we hope many do. We applaud that. But we also believe that entrepreneurs are very important. So those who will go into an existing corporation or an existing business and bring that proactive mindset, that innovative mindset of the entrepreneur, and work diligently for their employees. And so we should be marked by how we engage in work, because we work not for the eyes of another, but for the eyes of God. And so that should characterize how we engage. And then also we have, I know a young lady next year that's coming in. She wants to be a homeschool mom. And so her question was, I love the humanities, but the entrepreneurship, what am I going to do with that? I don't have an interest in that.
I love this so much because I think there's this wrong perception of entrepreneurship and business that exists even in Christian circles sometimes, that it's just like thinking of ways to make money, when in reality, the real impulse for like any good company, that is somebody sees a problem that is negatively impacting other people, and thinks about how could that be solved, in a way that would be provide some kind of product or service to make their life a little bit better. And that I think you're so right, that Christians should be uniquely equipped to think in this way and then do that.
Yeah, it is. It's a beautiful thing as people begin to realize what we're doing. Our students are catching a sense of this. It is a big picture of the world and of life. But if I could boil it down really as simply as possible, it is one, in our humanities, we learn to love God with all our heart, soul, mind, and strength. And in entrepreneurship, we learn to love our neighbor as ourselves. And so we create spaces of meaningful work for ourselves and for our neighbor. It's a very practical, tangible way of serving others and seeking their good. So we have one of the taglines we picked up along the way that we seek to do well while doing good. So we're not afraid of wealth. We want to foster wealth. We want to steward it well. But wealth is not the end game for us. It is serving the Lord by loving others as ourselves.
Let's talk about the Christian education tradition and the great books. And it's been amazing, since the early 1970s now, perhaps, and really not choreographed. It almost seems providentially. These schools started popping up. Schools like Logos School, Paracaravel, Thomas Aquinas College. They weren't in communication with each other, but it was believers who were discovering what Christian education had been, for centuries, and we're discovering this, and now all of these beautiful schools, colleges, in your case, are being built all over the country. Talk about kind of getting a sense of this tradition and how you hope to bring that into Christ College.
Right. Yeah, it's a great question. So the Christian intellectual tradition is very long and very rich. And oftentimes, as Christians, we don't realize just how deep and rich it is. And so the tradition has been passed on generation after generation after generation. And that's literally what tradition is it passing along. And so what we're trying to do is to recognize we're not the first to think these thoughts or to be challenged by the problems we currently are challenged by. And so tradition helps give us a perspective on these problems. They are often uniquely human problems. They're not a 21st century problem. And so as we begin to see how those problems have been engaged with thoughtful Christians over the years, that gives us perspective on our own problems. But one of the things I try to help our students understand is that bad ideas are recurring, but good ideas are enduring. And so a good idea in the first century is answering a human need. And if it is a genuinely human need, it's going to transcend those epochs. And so a good idea in the first century that meets a universal human need will teach us about our encounters with these deep human needs. And they will give us a head start. So we're not recreating the wheel or starting with a blank slate. So we have received this great tradition, and what we try to do is not live in the past. Okay, so one of the things that I want to always make clear to everybody I talk with about the Christian intellectual tradition is that it's not nostalgia. We're not driven to return to old things simply because they're old, but they are tried and true. There is a human wisdom that we can look back and say, yeah, this was a good answer, and this solved this problem. So that we encounter problems today that are very similar, we can learn from those solutions and then see how we can apply those solutions today. And so it is not simply a backward looking, it is a very present focused, reaching back and incorporating the wisdom of the ages into today's problems.
We're living through a moment, I believe, just a seismic shift in American education. I think a lot of parents really rethinking their own decisions about how they're educating their children. New York City, Los Angeles, actually declined in students, at public schools. A student who is looking at Christ College, do they need to have a K-12 Christian education going into that? Uh, are you looking for homeschool students, public school students? What'd you say?
Well, going back to the Theaetetus quote, the idea that we will take a student wherever they are. Socrates is very clear. He said, sometimes these don't seem to be the best and brightest, but through God bringing them to us and us working through these questions and answers, they come a long way and they have wisdom they didn't know they had. And so this is part of the relational component. What we're after are students who are desirous to learn and to grow. And so if a student is just wanting to come in, check a box, get a piece of paper, go out and start working, we're probably going to encourage them to go elsewhere. Yeah, we're a start. So for me to say that is to express our commitments. I was talking with one young man and I left the conversation and thought, all right, this is a full cup. I'm not sure he is ready to receive what he needs to receive to truly grow. And so a student like that may not be perfectly comfortable here. And so it is the type of student we're after, not so much their background, because I've never yet met a student who couldn't do this kind of work. I've met plenty who wouldn't, but I've never met some that couldn't. And so we're looking for the special type of student that would fit in here. Obviously, somebody who has been exposed to the great books, somebody who understands the liberal arts tradition will be more comfortable here. They won't have to learn the new vocabulary. They won't have to learn the goals that we're trying to do, the ins and outs of it. So yes, the classical conversations with homeschool students or the classical K through 12 would have a head start. But if a student is bright and enterprising and willing to work, they will find a place there.
Florida has some great Christian schools that we've got good partnerships with. Schools like Palm Beach Atlantic, Southeastern. I'm thinking of a school like New St. Andrews in Moscow, and kind of intentionally small.
Right.
When you think about what makes Christ College unique in Florida, the vision for Christ College in the next 3 to 5 years. Are you? Yeah. What do you see? What are you hoping for? What are you planning for?
Right. So we're very intentionally focused. So we're not trying to be the next big thing. We want to keep a smaller classroom setting so that we can do the Socratic dialogue. So we can focus on formation. I taught in very large universities and have had 100 plus in my philosophy class. And it's hard to do philosophy well with 100 plus. You can try, but when I sit across from 15 students and begin to talk with dialogue with them, begin to talk about important ideas, you get a sense that they're engaged and you can ask follow-up questions. There is a flow to the question and answer that is just enriching. And so we want to stay intentionally focused. We're not going to be large. We're not going to turn away whatever God brings us. But we will always work, whether we have to be diligent in our scaling, we will work to keep a very small, very focused feel. One of the reasons that I'm in the office and had to chase out students, except the professor, is that we normally eat lunch together. So we will spill over from the classroom into the office. We have a microwave here, refrigerator, so they will make lunch and we'll sit around and we will talk, about some ideas that we discussed in class, but we'll also talk about life. And so there's a relationality here that is deeper and richer than I've ever experienced in any other institution, Christian or otherwise. So that's what I see continuing on and deepening in the years ahead.
I love that what you're doing is in some ways very counterintuitive. Right now there actually is a fairly serious contraction of kids going to 4-year brick and mortar colleges. And some of the leading or most influential voices, especially on the political right, Tucker Carlson, Charlie Kirk, have been saying, "Don't go to college; it's a waste." Unfortunately, um, and it's especially impacting enrollment with young men, is what we're seeing. And that a lot of colleges now, they're maybe 40, 60, or less than that in terms of undergraduates. As you're talking to families, you're talking to young men in this moment about the value of spending these 4 years doing this. Tell us about how some of those conversations go.
Yeah, that's a great point because, yes, it's a very common question I get, particularly from young men. And I do want to reassure them that, college isn't for everybody. But the key that is applicable to everybody is stewardship. And so there's a sense in which God has equipped you in certain ways, both intellectually and physically. And there is a matter of stewardship. And so I had a professor once share with me that if you have the ability, that ability becomes your obligation. So you need to develop that as a good steward of the gift that you have. And so it may be that somebody goes off and gets a trade degree and goes and applies that trade. That's beautiful. God bless you. But also remember that there is a whole contemplative life to be matched with the active life. And to experience the full human life, you have to have them blended together. Now, that blending together is not easy. This is why we're still wrestling with it. And it was an issue that the ancients wrestled with. So Aristotle and Plato, they are full of these kind of questions: the active life and the contemplative life. How do they fit together? And in the Christian community, it's the Mary and Martha. How do we blend these two? And so, if somebody wants to go out and live the active life, God bless you. We will support you. But also remember, the contemplative life is equally important, if not more so, to the flourishing life. Learning to be the kind of human that will lead the flourishing life is what I want for each student. And so we begin with a conversation like that. And parents begin to understand that, yes, when we start talking about entrepreneurship, there is always a time horizon for the trades. The physical body can only take so much abuse. So you talk with those who've done the trades for 40, 50 years, and they are worn out. And so if you start thinking entrepreneurially, you can pursue the trades. But then what happens in 10 to 15 years is that you're going to need to hire others to do some work that you need. And so learning how to do the entrepreneurial task will actually help you do your trades better in the long run. So we're not afraid of trades. That is something very, very good. But we need people who can run the trade industry and can think in those terms.
Love it. Todd, I'm wondering if you can. Well, typically we conclude the Anchor podcast talking about books, and typically we phrase the question as the book that has been most formational for you, maybe a book you've returned to. I'm wondering though, for you, the book that has maybe been the most inspirational in your vision for Christ College. I'd love to hear about that.
Right. Yeah, that's good. Well, I've already mentioned Plato. Plato ranked pretty high on a reading list, and I know that automatically narrows narrows the audience who will take an act on that. But then I think St. Augustine, his view of creation, his view of the human mind, and his view of life is really, really been enriching for me. His confessions, as I mentioned, I felt like I was reading a mirror to my own soul as I was reading the confessions. And so his wrestling with the mind, with memory, all of those things are very, very rich to me. But it took me a while. It took me a while to really appreciate Augustine, because I think I had to confront my own soul before I was ready to hear it.
Sure.
So
Now,
Augustine's
as
confession,
founder, do you get to keep teaching as well at
I
Christ
do.
College?
So that's written into the contract. So there's no way I could not teach. I love to engage with students. I love to wrestle with big ideas, and I love to see them ignited in their mind. And so, yes, teaching is a part of it. There's a lot of other things I have to do as well. But the joy of my weeks are in the classroom.
Fantastic. And then, how can students and parents find out more?
So our website has been built to be very informative. Let me warn you ahead of time. It's written by nerds, and so so most social media folks or most website folks I come to, so there's a lot of words there. So, well, yeah, that's who we are. So you can visit our website. That it is www christ-college.com. Okay, so some people ask, why did you put the dash in there? Because Christ wasn't distinct enough. If you just throw a bunch of letters up there, it just looks like a bunch of letters. So christ-college.com. And then we have a newsletter that you can sign up for, and we will update you on the going-ons of the college every week.
Christ-college.com.
Yes.
Again, we're here with the founder of the new Christ College in Florida. Todd, I've heard great things. I love just seeing your heart for this kind of education, bringing it to the next generation. So come back on. Can't wait to hear updates about Christ College in coming years. Thanks for being a guest on the Anchor Podcast.
Sure. Thank you for having me. It's been a joy.